With many people at home doing strength training as a substitute for their swim sessions that they can't do because of the isolation period and restrictions, shutdowns, whatever you want to call it, it's really important to make sure we're getting the right training in. So today's video is all about how you can actually manipulate and make the most of those strength sessions. So we're not just wasting our time, we're getting actual performance benefit, and if anything, a bit of an injury preventative benefit out of it coming out the back end of this isolation. So stick around to listen to exactly how you need to be structuring your strength sessions to get the most out of them. Hey guys, Nick here. Welcome back to the channel. Everything science of endurance and sports science in general. Hopefully you enjoyed some of the videos so far. Please hit the subscribe button down below if you haven't already to be notified of any new videos coming. I'm aiming to do a couple of videos a week, as you would have seen over the last 2 weeks. So keep up to date with them. Plenty of good information coming soon. Today's video is all about strength training the right way to be able to improve your performance overall. With many athletes who can't swim now because pools are shut or don't want to go outside into open water. Obviously in Melbourne here, it's cooling down, so it's not as practical. But a lot of athletes stuck at home, one of the things that they're starting to get into, which is a really, really good positive, and I want to give a big tick to every athlete who's got into this, is strength training or strength conditioning overall, and doing some sort of strength training at home, whether you have equipment, whether you don't, whether you're making some creative choices around using cookbooks or textbooks, or even your kids and dogs I've seen being used as weight, as resistance to manipulate that strength session. It's really good to see that a lot of athletes are getting involved in it, because the benefits of strength training are undeniably huge for particularly endurance athletes. We go way back, a lot of endurance athletes never typically did any sort of form of strength training because they thought it would put on unnecessary size in terms of muscle mass, lean muscle mass, make them heavier, make them slower. It's not the case. What actually happens from an endurance athlete perspective is we're doing so much high volume endurance work. I say high volume, what I'm referring to is the number of hours across the week that you are doing endurance type training. So whether you're training 8 hours a week or 10 hours a week, some athletes 15, 20, 25 if you're an elite or pro. So it's the type of thing that you're doing a large amount of endurance training, long, slow, continuous, or you're doing some sort of extended intervals where, if you think about it, let's use a running example because that's the simplest form. Even if you're doing like a 3-minute effort, you're taking a large number of repetitions to create the steps in that movement to cause that 3-minute interval to occur in the first place. So we extend that out and you go and do a 3-hour run or a 2-hour run or an hour run, whatever it may be. You're taking a lot of these repeated repetitions at a very sub-maximal intensity. Not even when you're running fast, you're running slow, whatever it is, you're never at a maximal intensity because you have to repeat it. If you were at a maximal intensity, a genuine maximal intensity for that single step and contraction, you would be so fatigued after 2 steps, because left and right leg, that you wouldn't be able to complete anymore. It'd be like doing 2 very big explosive hops where you hop as far as you can on your right, you hop as far as you can on your left, and you wouldn't be able to repeat that equally or better in the subsequent repetitions after that. That would be like doing a complete all-out maximal effort. You're always doing this continuous endurance, repeated movement again and again and again. And this is where the common mistake comes in from a strength training perspective, is a lot of endurance athletes will just go and then pick up that methodology and repeat it from a gym session or an at-home strength training session, which is completely wrong and the wrong way to look at it. If we're already really good at an area, why not work on something that we're not so good at? And this is where in the gym or at home, when you're doing your strength training, we need to focus more on an area of strength and power, purely from the fact that we need to work on lifting our maximum abilities or maximum capacity. So like I said before with that hop example, if we can have a bigger hop because we're stronger and more powerful, and we can innovate the nerve, like the correct muscle motor units and the muscle groups, etc., to create a really coordinated movement, which I'll get into a second. If we can produce a bigger hop in a single effort, what does that mean for every sub-maximal effort? So those smaller hops, which are essentially those smaller steps that you take and you repeat that, each of those should be a lot more powerful as well, lifting everything up. It's the same principle when we talk about improving your aerobic engine overall. If you have a bigger aerobic engine, you can do more with it. If we have a bigger strength and power engine, if you like, we can do more with it. We have a more coordinated engine, that being the nervous system connection from the brain to the muscles, more coordinated body overall. We're going to be able to produce a lot more effective performance from an endurance perspective when we have to repeat that movement again and again and again. From a strength and power perspective, gets us to learn things in a controlled environment from developing the nervous system once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, however many, so that when we go out and we try and repeat those things under less intensity, so less load, it's just you're not lifting a bar on your back or whatever it may be, you're able to do that effectively again and again and again. Essentially, it comes down to the primary adaptation of strength training, which is neural adaptation. And when I say neural, I mean nervous system. Nervous system is essentially the connection between your brain creating an idea of what it wants to do, sending a signal down essentially an electrical impulse down your body into the muscles, causing them to contract. Bang, that's how we get our movement, and that's how we're able to run, swim, cycle, whatever our sport is. That nervous system adaptation is the central adaptation for all strength training. If we do some sort of strength training, regardless of what that looks like, we get a nervous system adaptation. Where we get the most nervous system stimulus, though, is from a strength, focusing on our maximum strength and our power aspect. It doesn't necessarily come too much from the endurance aspect. Will come a little bit, but like I said, because endurance athletes are heavily trained in that area already, we're not going to get any further stimulus by going and doing 15 reps or 20 reps of a squat, for example, in a gym, because we just went outside and we did a 2.5 hour bike session where we did hundreds, if not thousands, of single leg squat efforts pushing the pedals every single time. In terms of the adaptation side of things, we're looking at 3 key components to that nervous system development. We're looking at increased what we call agonist activation. So agonist is the muscle that we want to be working. If we're pushing the pedals on the bike, we want the quads to be really dominant and pushing forcefully down on the pedals. If we're talking a swimming action, we want the lats to be engaging at the correct time so we can pull through the water and transfer that force from upper body to the lower body, getting that nice fluid movement through the water and nice coordinated movement. We're also looking at getting the appropriate synergist activation. So the synergists are just the stabilizer, the assisting muscles. So think about through the hips, glute med in particular. We don't want our hips rocking and rolling. We want it to be nice and stable so we can leverage off it and step and push off the ground as effectively as we can. Think about what's happening through the ankle, through the calf, etc. That's allowing us to produce some of that propulsive force, stabilizing in and around the knee. All of these factors are really, really critical for our endurance performance movement. The last one is decreasing the antagonist activation. So I spoke about agonist before. Agonist is the muscles we want to move at the right times. Antagonist is the opposite. It's the muscles that are opposing it. So if we want to use the quads really effectively and produce a lot of force through the quads, we need our hamstrings to relax to allow it. Because the hamstrings and quads aren't going to contract at the same time because they do opposite actions. The quads, when we contract the quads, they're going to extend the knee and bring it up. So if you're sitting on a chair, you bring your foot up in a sort of swinging motion like that. That's where the quads are contracting to cause this bottom half of your leg to come up. When the hamstrings contract, it goes the other way. So we don't want those to be opposing each other because then you just end up with a locked leg like this. We can't go either direction. We need the hamstrings to relax when the quads want to contract, and when the hamstrings need to contract, we want the quads to relax. So we want those to be working opposite. Essentially what I've just described there is a really efficient way of moving. And that's all that strength training is doing. We want the parts that need to be working for us and working for us at their best capacities. We want the parts that aren't supposed to be working at those times to not be working, to allow the bits that need to do their thing. And then we want anything that's going to assist our positive processes to be working as well. And that's all we're trying to do. Improve our ability to control those 3 mechanisms through the nervous system is going to improve our overall performance. As an outcome of improving those qualities, we get 2 main things. We improve our ability to produce force, which is mostly due to better coordination of the muscles. We can use more muscles to create that movement. We've got better control of those muscles, so we can increase or decrease the amount of firing. So that increases or decreases the amount of force each of those muscles can produce. We've got very fine control over it. The other side of it is rate of force development. So how quickly can we produce that force? Put those together, the amount of force and how quickly we can produce it, that gives us power. Power is everything in terms of sports performance. We can put the most power out on the bike, we can push the most power out when we're running and sustain that power output for a longer period of time. We're going to be the fastest over the long run, everything else being equal. Obviously, you start to factor in nutrition, etc., but we're keeping it very simple. Over the long run, high power output typically is going to lead to an improved race result, like I said, with everything else being equal across the board. So how do we actually induce this adaptation through a strength training session? And what I'm going to do is put a continuum down the bottom here of basically sets, reps, but then also the loading strategies behind all of the aspects that we could do in a strength training program. And you'll notice on one end of the spectrum, we've got muscular endurance highlighted in yellow, and the other we have strength and power highlighted together. And they're at those ends of the spectrum because they are almost complete opposites. If we just continue to use that muscular endurance, high amount of reps, repeatedly, low load, so we may as well just go out and do another swim or another bike session or another run session. By doing strength and power, we drop the amount of reps down so we can keep as fresh as possible. We increase the amount of rest between periods, but also ideally we have to lift some of the intensity that we're lifting at to really stimulate that nervous system up and above what it's already used to. If you've already gotten through a reasonable amount of strength training, you're quite comfortable and quite confident, you've got a nice safe technique in things like a squat and a deadlift, ideally you want to be starting to put some weight to move against or something to work against, some sort of resistance to then be able to make it more challenging for that nervous system to fire a little bit more so and get a bit more of a neural adaptation out of that training, as opposed to just metabolic, which would be just repeating the same thing again and again and again and just making it harder by reducing the rest or doing more of it. We actually want to increase the intensity is the key. This is going to lead to those nervous system adaptations. So lower amount of reps, typically anywhere between 1 to 8. So 1 to 8 is going to be a broad range, but that's based on what intensity you're lifting at. So you look at the bottom of this continuum, repetition maximum. So repetition maximum is the maximum amount of weight you could lift for 2 reps or for 4 reps or 10 reps. Obviously, the higher that number goes, the less weight you're going to be able to do. If you do a squat 20 times, body weight might be the most amount of weight you could lift 20 times. If you did it 15 times, maybe you can hold a small dumbbell. If you did it 10 times, maybe you could hold a bar on your back. And if you did it 1 time, you gave your maximal effort, lifted as much as you could in 1 effort, you might be able to lift some decent amount of weight. You see how these match up though, is that we can only lift those really high intensities when we've got those low amount of reps, which is the top side, and vice versa. We can only lift we can lift a large number of reps, but only if the intensity is low. And this is where, again, if we keep doing the same thing repeatedly again and again and again, you get very good at it, but there's nowhere to go from there. You basically cap yourself out and give yourself a ceiling. By training the strength and power side of things, we're actually tapping into a different part of our overall physiology that's going to enable us to link that back and give us a greater capacity and ability from a muscular endurance perspective. So the key really here is strength and power is critical, low amount of reps, high rest, try to get the intensity up there. By no means am I saying go straight out and try and lift 100 kilos if you haven't done any strength training before. It's completely silly. Progress it slowly, but anything above what you've already previously done in terms of intensity, so the load lifted, is going to be a benefit to you regardless. For anyone who hasn't done strength before, by doing some sort of strength is going to be a bonus. But if we can keep the rep ranges low, couple of sets, large amount of rest in between, and ideally start to work on how much you can the load you can lift in those efforts, and increase the intensity side of things by increasing the load that you're lifting, we're going to be able to get a much better stimulus out of your strength session, rather than just going and, like I said, you may as well just go do another run. If you're going to do 50 squats and then have a rest and then do another 50 squats, just go out and do another run for half an hour. It's probably going to take the same amount of time, and it's probably going to give you the same effect, muscular endurance effect overall. So that's just a quick breakdown of what strength training purpose actually is, the adaptations from it, primarily that nervous system, and then what end of the spectrum we need to be working on, strength and power, to be able to achieve those adaptations. So hopefully you get a little bit out of this video. If you've got any questions about strength training and how you can manipulate it, obviously there's a lot of difficulty at the moment with lack of equipment or access to it. You don't necessarily have to have equipment. There are some ways you can get around it. If you do have any questions, please leave them in the comments or direct message me about how you can get around some of those aspects. But otherwise, hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to hit the subscribe button to keep up with the rest of the content, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the next one.